Hello everybody, welcome back to Throttle Grotto. This week, engine timing and some other junk. Up next on this episode of Throttle Grotto. Hey everybody, welcome back. So this week, another week of probably not so exciting work on both the 75 and the 83 GTI. The 83 is really beating me down right now. The starter, I went to go try to crank it over and the starters decided it was going to die, so I went to the junkyard and got a Mark III starter, and the Mark III starter was completely junk. So I have to return the Mark III starter and replace it, put it back on the car, which swapping it out on the car is a pretty quick process, but driving all the way to the junkyard to swap it out is not. But I figured first, I've got a little bit more daylight. I was going to put the engine timing together on the 75, and I wanted to show you guys. I ordered an engine, the lower timing cover, and I'm not even kidding you when I say that this piece, I haven't cleaned it. I literally took it out of the package, and it showed up. I've never seen a used part this clean before. I mean, there's a little bit of grease on one of the fins on the back of the engine cover, but man, like, if I could buy used parts this clean all the time, it'd be awesome. So shout out to Shokan Coachworks for cleaning the part before they sent it out. So it was pretty awesome to open up a package and see this thing cleaned up. So I'm going to get this thing on the car, set the engine timing, go pick up another starter, swap it out, and then we'll see if we can make any progress on the 83, because I also replaced the ignition switch because the ignition switch was croaking on me. So the car is having all kinds of problems. It's really like, doesn't want to wake up from the dead. And so the owner of the car, Anthony, is going to be by this weekend. We are going to work on the brakes and get the brakes bled and hopefully at least get that part of the process moving forward. I was hoping to have the car running by the time he got here this weekend to surprise him with it, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that way. My guess is the cleaning job that we've done on the injectors is not going to be good enough to make this car run. But I haven't given up hope yet, but I'm going to talk to him this weekend about ordering up some injectors, seeing if we can't get this thing running and stay running. Then all we got left is cooling system, and that car can go back to Anthony, and he can finish putting the interior and all that stuff back together. And hopefully at some point, I'll show you guys what the car looks like after he's got it all cleaned up, put back together, and it's a really clean 83 GTI, probably the last you'll see of a nice, clean, original GTI. There's just not many of them left, so if you see one that's original and clean, hang on to it, grab it, get it going. Man, it's those cars were disposable for a long time, and now people are trying to scoop them up because you just can't get them anymore. So I'll stop talking, put this part on, go get more parts, come back, and hopefully have some kind of success today. Alright, so part of the bummer about getting such a nice engine cover in the mail is I had to cut it up. Had to take a notch out of it to fit around, let's see here, fit around the engine mount there. So now that we've got that off of there and ready to all notched out, I'm going to put the timing belt on, put the lower pulley on, and hopefully set the engine timing. I also had to clearance here for the engine mount. so it's kind of a trial by error fitting this thing. As you can see, there's not a lot of room in here to work, even though like I can just barely get. Let me show you guys what that glare that's like. So as you can see, there's not a lot of room to work in here. My wrench can barely get into a few of these spots, which is kind of surprising because we're working on an old car that has a lot of room in the engine compartment. Got a couple bolts to put in the bottom, put on the lower pulley, and then I'll be ready to set the timing. I think I'm going to take a quick break and try to beat traffic and run over and swap that starter so that I can get back before traffic gets too bad. So, okay, so I've went to the junkyard. I've exchanged the starter that I bought earlier for one that actually works, and now I'm going to try to fire this thing and run it under its own power. I've also replaced the electrical portion of the ignition switch, which is down inside here. It's where the wiring plugs into up here, which allows the fuel pump to actually stay running because for some reason the old ignition switch had a short in it. And they do that. If you get a bunch of weird electrical problems in these cars, it's probably related to the electrical portion of the ignition switch. So now I'm going to try firing this thing up and seeing if we can make it run. It's still got a little bit of a stumble, but it's running under its own power with no help from me. So that is a huge win for this car. After sitting for 10 years, we've replaced the fuel tank, the fuel pump, the fuel lines, tried to clean out the injectors. I'm pretty sure that's where the misfire still lays. I'm pretty sure that the spray pattern on these injectors is terrible. And so I'm going to suggest to the owner of the car that we replace the injectors, but hearing the car run means that the CIS fuel distributor is working, so we've made huge progress on this car. We've still got brakes. I need to replace the whole braking system, which is not actually that big of a deal, and replace the cooling system, which will this car will be a runner and driver sooner than later. So I am going to take a quick video with my phone to send to the owner of the car because he will be super excited to hear this thing run. And I'm super excited to hear this thing run. So I'm going to wrap this up for the 83 this week with success of making this car actually fire off and run. And I know where the problems are now that I need to address. So it's time to get back to the 75 and finish up that timing belt job with the last few minutes I have for today. So there we go. Now we're actually at the point where we can set the engine timing. The reason that I had to wait until the cover showed up is because the timing mark is part of the cover, and I can't. I tried to look to top dead center on the flywheel to see. You could pull a spark plug and use a rod and try to get it pretty close, but the timing cover and the mark is the factory way to do it. Okay, so we are essentially ready to put this belt on, and we've got our timing mark here lined up with our notch on the head. We know that our crankshaft timing is on. Now all we need to do is get this belt on and snug up the tensioner. So usually this much difficulty putting a timing belt on indicates that there's something not right. It is a little bit difficult to make sure that you keep all the marks in the same spot when you're yanking on the belt trying to tighten it up and move everything around, but that's not the case here. This belt seems like it's too short, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of homework and figure out what's going on, because this just doesn't feel right. I've done a fair amount of timing belts, and this belt feels like it's about 4 teeth too short just by playing around with it. So I'm going to jump online for a few minutes and see what I can figure out. I've got a part number for the belt, and I'm going to see if maybe I just got the wrong belt. Alright everybody, so after some Googling, I figured out that I have a 152 tooth timing belt, and I need a 153 tooth. So the difference being is that I switched to a 16 valve mechanical tensioner, and everybody that does that uses a 153 tooth timing belt. So I won't be able to get it done tonight, but I will get a belt coming, and Friday I will be setting the engine timing on this car. So now I think I have everything. Now that I know I need a 153 tooth timing belt. I ordered this timing belt many moons ago, and ordered it before I did research. So you live and you learn. So I'll get a new belt, and I will get this timing wrapped up this week. So lesson to you all if you're going to do one of these swaps. 153 teeth. So that's it for tonight, and I will catch you guys up later in the week. Alright everybody, so thanks to the Amazon dude, or dudette, I don't know, I have a timing belt. So I'm going to pull the old one off, compare the two, make sure that this one is indeed just a hair longer, ideally only 1 tooth longer, because that's what I ordered, and we'll get it put on the car and see if we can get this engine timed finally, because it's been too long. So now I have the two belts side by side. This is the 152 tooth, this is the 153 tooth. Only 1 tooth difference between these two belts. So if we take them, kind of line them up like that, stretch them out, you can see that there's a pretty significant amount of difference in length between the two belts. So that should be the length that we need to get it to slide over that camshaft pulley. So now you know. 1 tooth can make all the difference. So literally, it slid right on, like a perfect fit. Now I still need to go through and put the crank pulley back on and make sure none of our timing marks moved, and then tension the pulley here. But that looks to be right. Alright, so you can see we've got our crank pulley back on. Looks like our notch is still lined up with the timing cover. Our camshaft mark is lined up with the notch in the valve cover. Now the only thing left to do is to tighten up the this pulley here, and then we can turn it over by hand, and this part will be done. So my technique for tensioning, or turning the tensioner on these cars, is kind of rudimentary, but it works, especially if you're kind of short on tools. So I've got a 3mm Allen wrench, and then the socket that fits over the stud. Sometimes it's a 13mm nut, sometimes it's a 17, but in this case it's a 17. And so I insert the Allen wrench into the hole, loosen this up just a little bit, and then pry against the socket to tension it. And you can go into either one of the two holes, whichever makes it easier on you. And then you just bring it up, snug down your tensioner, and there you go. Alright, so the last piece of this puzzle, as we've talked about, is to turn it over 2 times by hand, or 2 revolutions at the crank by hand, which makes sure that everything, pistons and valves and everything, don't contact each other. So to make it a little bit easier to keep track of, I just put a little piece of orange electrical tape on my crank pulley, just merely as a guide. And that is that. We have set the engine timing, we've turned it over by hand at least 2 revolutions, so there was nothing in the engine contacting each other. So even if it were to be just a little bit off, it would be still safe to crank it, because there's nothing contacting anything in the engine. So no valves meeting pistons, which you can even bend a valve just by using the starter. So we are good to go, and now we can move on to other things. So that's all the time I have for this week's episode. Thanks so much for watching. Till next week, get out there and work on something.